Hi, I'm Kevin Doherty. I am joined by the internationally acclaimed pianist, curator, host, and advocate Lara Downes, who, as many of you know, also happens to live right here in Sacramento. Welcome and thanks for making a little time for us today, Lara. How
It's
you
great
doing?
to see you. I'm good. I'm
Good.
good. Yeah.
Good. So you're obviously not in Sacramento at the moment. I know that you are on the road. So where are you chatting with us from?
I just got to Houston a couple hours ago. It's been 2 weeks on the road, one more and counting. Um, so many cities, so much weather.
Yeah, I especially this time of year, right? Like there's no normal season anywhere right now. It's all got to be different.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many cities have you been to on this tour in the last couple weeks?
I think this is number five.
Yeah.
But I started in Michigan and yesterday I was in Miami. So you can
Oh,
imagine the wardrobe quandaries.
how many bags?
So many bags.
So many.
But you know what I've been doing? I've been shipping home boxes from every stop. I'm like, okay, done with these boots. Bye bye. Off you go. So I just find a post office and I use one of those flat rate boxes and I put stuff in it.
I love it. And you're out. Go go home with you. Um, I mean, seriously, you've been pretty busy lately, right? Like suddenly, like back on the road. I mean, are you feeling like you're back to a normal touring schedule since the whole pandemic has sort of began and now it's kind of
This is actually a weird coming together of things. What this is a lot of things that were rescheduled out of 2020 and then again out of 2021 into the spring, plus new things that had come up along the way. So this is very heavy, and it's not just me. A lot of my colleagues are, um, getting through these really intense few months. So through from now through the summer, it's very very heavy, and then I think the fall will be more normal.
so a lot of it's sort of fulfilling like obligations for postponements and stuff then.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
What are you up to and what are you performing in Houston this week?
This is a concert with the Apollo Chamber players who are
Hmm.
great. And we're doing some Florence Price and I'm doing some stuff off of my Joplin album. Yeah, it's been a lot of different programs too on this trip. So
Yeah, Apollo Chamber players are great. We have a couple of their albums, and I've actually spoken with Matt before, which was pretty cool. They're a lot of fun. Well, of course, even though you weren't able to tour during the pandemic, I mean, I would have to say that you're still one of the most visible classical musicians out there, especially when it comes to advocating for artists of color and women in this wide world of classical music, and for your tireless work. You were recently awarded the 2022 Classical Woman of the Year by Performance Today and American Public Media. Well, congratulations for that. And how does that feel?
I mean, it's such a beautiful recognition because it comes from the staff at Performance Today. And, as we know, Fred Child and the whole team there, they just respect and admire the work that they've been doing for so long, so much, but also from listeners. It's also, a sort of a vote from listeners all around the country. So it really means a lot. And it's a, it's an impressive bunch of women to be part of. Marin Alsop and Joanne Folletta, Valerie Coleman. So yeah, I'm so grateful and very moved.
Yeah.
Fred sprung this on me in the middle of like what I thought was going to be an interview about the album, like literally on Zoom like this live. He said, "Yeah, I do want to talk to you about your album, but I also have something else to tell you." And then I got super emotional, and they used the whole thing in an interview.
Oh, that's so cool. So it wasn't like you were at like the Grammys sitting there and nominated and waiting to be called. Like you had no idea that
You
this was
had no
even
idea.
in the pipeline.
No, no.
Oh, that's wow. That had to be a really nice moment then.
It was
That's
really nice. Yeah. And then they sent
awesome.
this beautiful statuette that I have at home.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Congratulations. Um, well, it makes sense. Your work. I personally see your work as breaking down barriers. For an entirely new generation of music lovers to come and experience quote classical music, right? Like all of the music. And you have your NPR video series Amplify with Lara Downes. You recently founded Rising Sun Music, and actually I'm very interested in Rising Sun Music, because I'm just curious as to kind of what it is. This is your curation series. Are you looking at like a record label here? Like what's going on with Rising Sun? I know you've had a couple albums out in the last year or so.
Yeah. It's a label, and we've been putting out EPs every single month since February of 2021. So the goal with that, this kind of the vision for this came because a couple of years ago, I was asked to speak at the Public Radio Program Directors Group, and we were talking about shifting the narrative and expanding the canon, and just changing the balance of what gets played on the radio. And of course, what came back from that conversation is we want to do this. We don't have the recordings, right? So we can talk about music by Florence Price and other, great composers who have been sort of erased by history. But if the recordings don't exist, the music doesn't exist. So I was fortunate enough to get a generous grant from the Sphinx organization. And in early 2021, I founded the label. And, we have global distribution, and these tracks get serviced to radio stations around the country and around the world. And I mean, it's been more than 50 recordings in a year. So as because your library, that's a lot more recordings than there were a year and a half ago.
Yeah, no kidding. And so many folks are taking that up now, which is great. But you are certainly, I mean, you've always just kind of been leading the way. You say 50 recordings, like 50 singles or 50
Yeah.
albums? No,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. 50. Yeah. And a lot of it, of course, is done under pandemic circumstances. So it's been a major undertaking, but you know me. I mean, you know me well. When I want to do something, I want to do it now today.
Yeah.
And also this just felt like, I think we talk in the industry and we talk in the world at large about change being slow and, a little bit at a time. But honestly, there are some situations in which change can be fast.
Yeah.
And I look back over this year and, there was no sleep and there were some gray hairs, but this is a big change really quickly. And I think also the doing of it has encouraged other people to take up this repertoire. I mean, one of the stumbling blocks that I ran across for years, forget about radio play, but even if I wanted to share a piece of music with someone, there was no reference recording. So just, to have these out there to normalize, I think that we've done so much quickly to normalize a different definition of the American musical canon.
It's so important because it's music that for so long was missing from the American vernacular, and like it really, I mean, you put Florence Price into the mix, and it just rounds out what that sound was in the early 20th century, what that always should have been. So, yeah, it's just it's super exciting, and it is super exciting that yes, sometimes like you said, like you just have to decide to do it. Like we can't wait anymore. We can't take the steps, and we can't just wait to make everybody. We just have to go. We just have to go for it, and that's that's awesome. Well, with all of the work that you're doing, I'm actually curious as to like how you measure success, like awards aside or whatever it is. Like it's nice to be recognized for that stuff, but are you hearing from people? Are you seeing differences in the concert hall? Are you seeing differences in I don't know, people buying the music? Like are those measurables out there?
I mean, I'm seeing those things. I'm experiencing those things all the time, like intensely so. Since I put out my first Florence Price recordings back in 2020. I mean, people are generous and I love it that listeners share their responses, but there's a concentration of response that is new and huge. And, people seeking me out through the website or just, via social media and just writing to say how moved they are and how touched they are by this music and how much they are discovering and how this music is leading them to other discoveries. So that is tremendous. That's everything I could ever wish for. I think the other big change I'm seeing is, I'm working a lot with conservatory students everywhere I go. I mean, this week I've been at the Frost School in Miami. I was at University of Maryland. Lots of young people, the next generation of musicians, and they have a familiarity. They're starting to have a familiarity with this music, which means that they don't have to go through what I went through and what you went through, of like discovering this as something new. This is something that is being shared with them, and they can then expand upon it. So I do think it's a time of tremendous shift in the industry. As far as audiences, I think it's a little hard to tell right now. It's still a bit of a pandemic audience, and so that like total transformation of a concert hall audience, maybe not quite yet. But I'm going to wait and see in the summer when I'm doing the summer festivals. I feel like that's where I'll see, who's coming out now and why.
Yeah. I think it's safe to say, too, that even probably in existing audiences, there are a lot of audience members that are very hungry for something interesting, something new, something
totally.
exciting. Yeah, yeah. You bring up a great point, though, about schools. I mean, that is really where the change is going to happen because, like you said, I mean, when you and I went to school, I mean, we were probably lucky in our music history classes if Clara Schumann and William Grant still got a mention, and then it was, and then that was it. Back to back to Robert, back to Brahms.
Yeah.
So yeah, that'll be an exciting change to see as this next generation comes into already happening. Well, so you're back on the road. Obviously, one of your next stops is the Mondavi Center, which is a funny thing to say you're on the road, but you're coming home, but it's still part of the tour, right? And this looks to be a super exciting program with Clarice Assad. It's called World of Change. And I honestly, I looked for some information. I don't know a whole lot about this. Can you tell us kind of what the piece is about and how it came about?
Yeah, it's a beautiful project, and it's interesting. This is a project that we started to develop before the pandemic. Kind of one of those big idea projects, climate change and global shift and all these things that at that time in 2019 felt a bit abstract and malleable. And we had a commitment from the University of Maryland to commission and premiere the work. And then the pandemic hit, and so everything got put on pause. And I think Clarice and I both just kind of backed away from it because, nothing seemed doable. And then when we returned to the project, the idea of a world of change was very much a real thing. So, we just did the piece for the first time at Maryland a week and a half ago. It's, I don't know if you know Clarice's writing. It's so beautiful and like soaked with so many different things. She's Brazilian, so there's this Brazilian influence. She's, very at home with sort of global music. And then also, there's kind of a pop sound to it. We're using some electronics, and then there's just some, very beautiful ensemble writing. Her piece itself centers really around the idea of water, and both in the context of climate change and just sort of like the places that water carries us. And then it ends with this idea of like the cyber waters and the ways in which we navigate those waters in our current world. And then the other half of the program is a set of pieces that I've been commissioning during the pandemic from composer friends, really small miniatures that reflect just individual change and shift, called Promises to Keep. So it's an intimate program, and I think very immersive.
Yeah, it sounds like it'll be a moving program for sure.
Mm-hmm.
As far as World of Change, I mean, you said you started it in 2019, and then there was a whole lot that went on. So you kind of stuck with the. Did anything get added or changed to Clarice's work, or is it just kind of as is, and you're picking up where you left off?
So really, she hadn't started writing it until
okay.
This like phase 2, which is really, I think it was a gift in some ways. It's funny, I have a couple of projects like that. I also have this concerto that Paolo Prestini wrote for me, which was going to be premiered in the summer of 2020, and now is having all its first performances this summer. And in the meantime, the intent and the direction of that piece also shifted. So yeah, it's been kind of an incubation time in some ways.
Yeah. Got to be fun to at least come back to the music, or if there wasn't music at the time, to revisit some of these conversations after it's just been the longest 2 years.
It has indeed.
Well, so I'm gonna let you go here in a minute, but I'm going to call you out about something. I hear that you're a radio host now. I thought you would at least leave something for the rest of us. What? Tell us a little bit about your new gig.
So this was, a call that came again during the pandemic, KDFC in San Francisco. And, that's the station I grew up with in the city. And the question was, is this something that you would consider? And the position is resident artist for KDFC and KUSC in LA, which means a combination of on air broadcasting. I do the evening show and live events and digital events. So I remember this conversation so well. The question was, is it something that you would consider? And what came out of my mouth was yes, because when I grow up, I want to be Leonard Bernstein, meaning the harnessing of this platform as a communication hub, as a way to, tell the stories and educate and just like broaden the audience was super appealing to me. So so I jumped into that, and now the show is simulcast, so San Francisco and LA, and we're just really getting going with this series of live events, because COVID kind of slowed that down for a while. But it's really exciting, and it's a new way for me to interact with listeners who know me through my music, and now also I think there's there's this kind of personal relationship that develops on the air.
Well, there is a real relationship there, and now, your audience then gets to know you in a completely different way, and almost getting to understand the person behind the music, and that's a really huge thing, and that's a wonderful thing to be able to share, especially if you're willing. And I know that you are, and I think that that's great. And so again, hey, listen, this has been great. Thanks so much for taking the time, and all of the congratulations in the world to you on all of those successes. So I'm Kevin Doherty. I'm here with the next Leonard Bernstein, Lara Downes, and Lara, it's been great talking to you. Thanks for stopping by.
Thanks so much, Kevin.
Absolutely.